What is good, everybody? It's your boy, and y'all already know what time it is. X-Men 97, Season 2, Episode 7. We got a lot to talk about. So, off rip, the episode opens up with a flashback of Colossus and Magik from last season, showing their point of view from the Genosha massacre by the Sentinels. Basically, it's Colossus and Magik kind of making their last stand, and Magik pretty much sacrifices herself for Colossus and ends up, dying tragically in his arms, which is, pretty messed up. For those who don't know, Colossus and Magik are sisters, and, Magik, she's more prominent as being a part of the New Mutants team, New Mutants line when it comes to like X-Men comics, and Colossus is more in line with being part of the original team and things of that nature. Fast forward to present day, and Graydon Krieg, who those of you don't know, maybe you remember him from the original X-Men series. He's basically, one of the biggest mutant haters of all time, which is ironic because he's son of Sabretooth and Mystique, and he carries their, angry and nature, but it's all directed towards mutant, and he's basically having one of those, clan mutant, anti-mutant rallies, you know what I'm saying? And he's pretty much declaring that he's announcing that he's going to be running for president because he feels that the way that Valerie Cooper is running X Factor currently this season is more tailored towards helping mutants, and obviously he's anti-mutant, he's a mutant hater, so he thinks that she needs, to be out of office, and the government basically needs the whole regime, basic mutant hating mumbo jumbo that, the X-Men shows and comics are known for. He's basically back up to his old shenanigans. Sad for him though, midway through his rally, Exodus and a whole bunch of other mutants show up that have been taking refuge on Savage Land and pretty much kidnap Graydon Krieg, and then they make their demands on national television, basically telling Valerie Cooper, the leader of X Factor, she's watching, that either give us all the mutants that you have rallied up and imprisoned and release them into our custody, or Graydon Krieg is pretty much he gone. It's over with. You got like, I think he 24 hours, 48 hours, something like that. The usual you have 24 hours before, we commit this act. But yeah, they kidnapped Graydon Krieg, and that was that. The X-Men were watching. Nightcrawler and Rogue, the focus was on them heavy because Graydon Krieg is their brother. And, they've been a part of the original X-Men team for a while, and they're familiar with Colossus and, are very close with him. So seeing this happen, seeing this, divide between the X Factor group, the X-Men group, and Exodus group, which he is calling the Occultes, and those you don't know, in the comics, he pretty much takes up, kind of the same ideology that Magneto had, but a little bit more extremist, and they're pretty much doing this in his name. The Occultists are pretty much a group in the name of Magneto, following his death, earlier this season, and they're pretty much trying to pick up where he left off as far as, mutant kind being the superior race and taking over. So it's a lot of moving parts going on. It's a lot of big factors. So yeah, so basically an elite team of the X-Men are tasked with getting back Graydon Krieg and, bringing him back to X Factor custody because, every time there's something bad with mutants going on, the X-Men are always to blame, even if the mutants aren't affiliated with them whatsoever. So basically Nightcrawler, Rogue, Polaris, Bishop, and I want to say Beast was there. I want to say Beast was there as well, but I could be wrong. Basically, they all go there, and they go to Savage Land, and their plan is to, bring Graydon Krieg back. So on their way there, they basically have issues because when you enter Savage Land, you pretty much lose. There's like an inhibitor tower that pretty much halts all of your mutant powers. So the plane ends up crashing. Bishop falls out, is about to die. Polaris, makes a last stand and jumps out and tries to save Bishop and succeeds, but she gets split up from the rest of the team. Her and Bishop do. And Bishop is having these issues with his powers. His energy source seems like it's about to pretty much combust at any moment. So they're pretty much on a time clock to get back to the crew and find a way to either get out of Savage Land or, get their powers back working before Bishop just goes boom, basically. In the meantime, Nightcrawler and Rogue have met up with the Occultists, and they're not too happy, bro. They're not too happy. Graydon Krieg is pretty much being held there, and they're getting ready to execute him. But Nightcrawler makes a proposition to Colossus and Exodus, which is very interesting. So yeah, basically, it's Nightcrawler, Beast, and Rogue. They're with the Occultes, they're with Colossus, and Nightcrawler pretty much challenges Exodus into say, we always talk about fairness, this and that. Well, you're going to execute Creed without even giving him a fair trial. And Exodus is like, so you're basically saying that you want to, be this dude's lawyer and you want to try to prove his innocence in front of all of us? He's like, yeah, Nightcrawler's like, yeah, unless you're not confident that you can prove, his guiltiness. And just to make things, fair, I want Colossus to be the one to preside over the trial. So Colossus agrees. They end up having a trial. They go back and forth. Exodus relays Creed's crimes against mutants. Nightcrawler, he comes from, the Christian evangelical standpoint of, forgiveness, this and that, yada, yada. Because Nightcrawler, he's a Christian, character, and, he follows God. And that's like a big part of Nightcrawler's origin. Trying to find the forgiveness, even though, us as humans, we, it's difficult for us to understand, like, God's way of forgiving people, even when they do the most atrocious crimes against humanity, or, in this case, mutant kind. But yeah, so they pretty much have their trial, but right before Colossus makes his verdict, Exodus basically, gets cold feet and attacks Colossus because he's not confident that Colossus is going to make the verdict that he wants. And then it breaks out to an all-out war. We got the X-Men versus the Occultists. Nightcrawler's going band for band with Exodus with the sword play until Bishop and Polaris show up and destroy the inhibitor tower, and pretty much all the X-Men have their powers back. And after that, Exodus is just like, yo, no, this is not good. We're about to lose, yada, yada. But, it still gets a little testy there. And before Creed is pretty much about to get killed by Exodus, Nightcrawler is able to teleport him to the Arctic, and Creed, doubles down on his hate, on his viciousness. And Nightcrawler, pretty much kind of scares him and threatens him like he's going to kill him by choking him to death. But then he ends up leaving him and said, I'll let your crimes, I'll let God handle your crimes. I'll let the people decide what to do with you. Basically, X-Factor eventually ends up retrieving him, but Valerie Cooper is not happy with Charles Xavier. Charles Xavier's like, look, you wanted Creed back. We got him back. He's in your care. I don't know what the problem is. But, they didn't bring them back directly to X-Factor. So, Valerie Cooper's all, you're playing a dangerous game, yada, yada, yada. If you continue this, I'll shut down the school. I'll shut down everything X-Men related. So she's threatening him with that. And that's pretty much the main bulk of the episode. But then, of course, they got to have a mini post-credit, mid-credit scene. They pull up to the lair of Apocalypse, Rogue, Jubilee, Jubilee, Cable, X-Force, the X-Force team. And they find the dead skeleton of Apocalypse and a ripped, torn playing card, which can only mean things might have not went too well for Apocalypse last episode when we saw him resurrect Gambit, and Horseman of Apocalypse Gambit is on the loose. So X-Men 97 just keeps getting crazier and crazier, man. And I'm excited for next episode. I believe there's only going to be 10 this season, so I think we only got 3 left. Bro, they gotta start making more episodes, man. I don't know where you got to allocate the funds, where the budget is. We got to start getting at least 16 season episodes or something, bro. 10 is not enough, but I'm excited for next week. Let me know what y'all think in the comments below. What did you think of this episode? And what's your favorite episode of the season so far? And I'm out. Peace.